This program comes to you by electrical transcription. The Treasury Star Parade. With a flock of American citizens, Al Goodman and his orchestra and chorus, and Frederick March is our master of ceremonies. Our slogan, Millions for Defense.
Any bonds today? Bonds of freedom is what we're selling. Any bonds today?
This is Frederick March, ladies and gentlemen, in another of the new series of programs brought to you by the Treasury Department. Today we bring you a special presentation for Americans only. I want you to sit down quietly and get set with your ears, as I'm going to tell you a little fable. It's not such an old fable. Well, what does old mean? It took the good Lord around 2 billion years to build the earth, and it looks like folks will tear it to pieces in 5. Countries falling overnight. Dictator A says to Dictator B...
Adolf, how about the lunch of today, between 12 and 1?
Sorry, Benito. From 12 to 1, I'm conquering a country. How about 1 to 2?
Things happen like that these days. Today, things move so fast that a month might be 1,000 years. Well, let's get on with our fable. Once upon a time, a long time ago, there was a great nation. And something had happened to that nation. Something almost too big to understand or explain. Perhaps we ought to say that it wasn't a nation which believed in war, it believed in peace. And it had clung to peace in a world which had gone mad with war. If you don't believe me, listen. Because the man in Vermont said...
This is their war. 'Twasn't none of our doing. Let them fight it out, just so long as they leave us alone.
The man in California said...
Seems to me extremely improbable that we'd be involved in the war, not if we're careful and mind our own business.
And the man from Idaho said...
I'm against war. The only reason I can see for our getting into it is if we should be attacked. But we won't be. That'd be silly.
And the man from Texas said...
We've been fighting their wars for them long enough. As far as I'm concerned, it's dog eat dog from now on, and let the devil take the hindmost. Let's us all stay at home.
Yep. That's what they said, the men in all the states. Oh, yes, they did. And they said it because way down deep they didn't want war. Then one day, the man in Chicago got up in the morning, it was a Sunday morning, and just as he always did, he turned on his radio and sat down to read the American Weekly in the comic section. And then suddenly, on the radio, he heard a voice.
A news dispatch has just come in by shortwave from Honolulu, saying that a squadron of Japanese planes at 7:50 this morning bombed Pearl Harbor and the adjoining airports and military objectives. We have not as yet received official confirmation from Washington.
And the man in Los Angeles heard. And the man in New York and in New Orleans, in Portland and Davenport and Oklahoma City and Seattle and Miami. Everyone heard the news everywhere. And everywhere, everyone felt the same. All the people of that great nation were numb and sick with their misery because they didn't want war. But they were mad, too. Oh, they were mad way down deep inside because they had been betrayed by smiling faces and deceptive words and then stabbed in the back. Oh, yeah. They were mad. And they set about getting ready to defend themselves, to make sure that when they were through, they would have made a world in which a nation that did not like war could live in peace forever after. You see, it was the only thing they could do. And while they were doing it, because they were a great nation, they figured that they might as well do a good job of it, one that would last for a long while. And in Illinois and Michigan, the giant wheels started turning. And in California and Seattle and Pennsylvania, the planes started roaring off assembly lines and taking to the air. And the mighty turbines started humming. And great blast furnaces roaring. And everywhere, the great nation put its strength and mind and heart into the gigantic task before it. And from Detroit we heard...
So you need tanks. All right, we'll give you tanks.
And from Gary...
You need steel. All right, we'll give you steel.
And from Kansas City...
More planes, you bet.
From all over, everywhere, came men, millions of men, off of farms and out of cities, from San Francisco to Portland, Maine, and from Sault Ste. Marie to Brownsville, from every hamlet and village and city and roaring metropolis, men, millions of them, marching all of them, into the future, just to make sure that this nation would remain a great nation, and that liberty would not die from the face of the earth. You ever see a great nation preparing, rising in its might to defend itself? Oh, you should have seen this nation. It was something to remember. And all sorts of men went to the Capitol. Big men, important men, earnest men, because there was such a lot of work to do, thousands of them working in the Capitol, to make sure that this great nation would be ready and not found wanting in its critical hour. And one little man went to Washington. And from Washington, he could hear voices everywhere, all kinds of voices. And the voice from Georgia said...
I want to help, but what can I do?
The voice from Iowa said...
I've got to help, but how?
The voice from Arizona said...
This is my fight. Let me in on it.
All sorts of people everywhere wanting to know what they could do because they knew that they were at war. Not just the Army, not just the Navy, but everyone. Everyone in that great nation was at war. And everyone wanted to help, to do his part. And the little man listened. And from everywhere he heard...
We want to help. We got to help. Tell us what to do.
And the little man went over to see the president in the White House to find out. And he saw that the president was busy, that he had more work to do than any one man should have. And he went over to see Congress, and he saw that they had more than they could bear. And then he went to see a man named Nelson, and also a man named Henderson. And he found them so snowed under that they just didn't have the time to tell all the little man what to do. And he was very sad, because he could hear all the voices from Louisiana and Kentucky and Nebraska and Oregon, New Mexico, Mississippi, Florida, Virginia, everywhere, crying...
We want to help. We got to help. What can we do?
So he went to his wife in their hotel room in the Capitol, and he said to her...
This is no place for us. Let's go home. I want to think. Something's wrong, and it's got to be put right. I want to sit at home quiet-like and think a while.
And so the little man and his wife went back home, back to Gilead. And he walked down the streets, and there were all of his friends and neighbors.
Hiya, Fred.
Hello.
Good morning, Fred.
Hiya.
So you're back, Fred.
Yeah.
I was Washington, Fred.
All right.
Glad you're home, Fred.
Howdy, Fred.
Howdy, boys.
And he thought to himself...
These are the people who have always been America and who always will be America. These are the little people.
And because he had gone home from the Capitol to Gilead to think, he did a lot of thinking. Powerful lot. He thought...
There are so many little people, and it's such a great nation, maybe they're confused. Maybe all these little people have forgotten that they built this great nation.
And he went home and he said to his wife...
It was the little people who built this great nation. They stood with their guns and muskets behind the trees and the barns and the stone fences in New England and watched it being born. They took their families and their possessions on horseback and in stagecoaches and in covered wagons by ox team and afoot, and they went out and fed their nation and watched it grow.
And the little man remembered his great-grandmother, and he thought...
It was the little people who fought with the Indians and won our land, single-handed or in pairs, but it was always the little people. All through our history, it's been the little man and his work that have made this a great nation.
And then he thought of the war again. And of all the voices of the little people who were confused, who said...
We want to help. We got to help. What do you want us to do?
I'm from Massachusetts. Somewhere there must be a job for me. But where is it?
I'm from New Jersey. The men in the Army, the men in the Navy, men and women in factories and munitions plants and on assembly lines, they've got a job. What do you want me to do?
I'm from Indiana. Granted, I can't sit here and twiddle my thumbs. There's work to be done. And don't tell me there isn't. But what do you want us to do?
Tell us what to do.
Yes, the little man could hear all of these voices. And because he was one of them, he knew why they were confused. And he thought...
They're right. The men in Washington can't win this war all by themselves. It's us, the little people who have to produce the food, the weapons, and the fighters that'll win the war. And if we want, we can do it with production. Not in 1943 or 4 or 1945, but production now. Production now.
Production now. Production now.
And so, as he walked along the streets of Gilead and met his friends, he said to them...
There's a meeting on Washington's birthday at the Opera House. Wish you could come.
Glad to, Fred, glad to. What's it for?
We're going to discuss how we can get into production now.
Production now?
Production now. Production now. Production now.
And he walked along the street and he met another friend. And he told this man to ask his friends.
Ask your friends. Bring along everyone you can. We want representative people from all over the county. We're going to talk about production now.
Production now. Production now. Production now. Production.
I've been doing a lot of thinking, Bill. The war kind of got close to us here in Morrow County when the hydraulic press company plant began turning out bomber presses. And when that bomber came down Leroy Faust's cornfield, we all want to feel that we have a part in winning this war, and production now gives us the chance.
Production now. Production now. Production now. Production.
You coming to the meeting, Bill? You coming to the meeting, Henry? You coming, Tom? Oh, Reverend McCutcheon, we'd like you to come and ask God's blessing.
Production now. Production now.
Well, they poured down the country roads. Farmers and shop workers and merchants and their families, 15,000 of them. 15,000 little people who had got a great big idea by the tail. The high school band played America. And the little man whose idea it was stood and watched them come in and find their places in the opera house. And their faces were set and determined. And he knew that these were the little people who had built the great nation. And that their big idea couldn't fail. And then the meeting came to order, and the preacher made a prayer. And then the little man and some of the other little people explained their big idea and how they thought it'd work.
I'm a naive guy. I'm a sucker for ideals. Sitting and talking with my wife in Washington, I got to thinking, Congress can't win this war by themselves. The president can't win it by himself. MacArthur can't do it alone. They're all bent down with the greatest load on their shoulders since Christ started up the slope of Calvary. Then I got the conviction that the common people back home could win this war. Wow! By a kind of guerrilla production program, if you want to call it that. By the people in little places, in the small towns. With everybody pitching in. Not next week, not next year, not 5 years from now. That may be too late. What we want is...
Production now!
And here's how we do it.
It sounds simple the way they did it. Maybe it was simple. They did their job with what they had at hand. And the way they did it was this way.
We're taking a census, Bill. All the men and all the machines in Morrow County. We're tossing all our manpower and all our machine power into a pool. And wherever we need it, we'll move it.
We're making a census of the entire county of available living quarters, food storage, and all, so that if there is trouble on the East Coast and they have to evacuate women and children, we'll know just how many we can house and feed and clothe.
Hey, Kenny, I want to talk to you. We're organizing a transportation pool out at the plant so that one car will take as many as it'll hold, and the rest of us will leave our cars at home until our turn. That way, we'll be using only about 1/5 as much oil and gas and rubber. You get it?
Clean out your attics, girls. You'll find there's a lot of stuff. Paper, metal, scrap that we can use.
I'm a salesman.
I'm a teacher.
I'm a clerk. We want to give our time to production now.
Well, that's the way they're doing it out in Morrow County. The little man walked home in the late afternoon sunlight and smiled a little to himself. His mind was full of dreams and his eyes were full of vision. And from all over Ohio and from all over his great country, he could feel the mighty surge and pulse of the people. And where there were millions before, only one voice asks now,
What shall we do?
And where there was only one voice before, millions answered,
Production now!
Let's get to peak production. We've got to keep our factories running 24 hours a day if we're going to win this war. And time is the important factor. It must be done now. All over the country, men and women are beginning to realize how much there is to be done, and their personal responsibility to see that it gets done. Find your job. Do it. And then do a little bit more. It's that extra that counts. And there's one thing we all must do. Buy defense bonds and stamps. Budget a part of your income every week and join the Treasury payroll savings plan wherever you work. Invest in defense bonds and stamps. They may mean the difference between victory and defeat. America is your country. Keep it yours. The United States Treasury Department thanks the distinguished artists who gave their talents to this performance. Frederick March and all the American citizens, with a special bow to Fred Sweet, who thought up the idea of production now. Orchestra and chorus were under the direction of Al Goodman. Writing by Hal Block, John Latouche, and Malcolm Meacham. Production by William A. Bacher. This is Larry Elliott speaking.